Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for what will be the concluding part of my short mini-series on armoured fighting vehicles in Upfront. Now, usually I like to end on a bit of a high note, but I'm afraid this one, in terms of addressing the last of the questions I've received about how these beasts behave, is going to be looking at everything that can possibly go wrong with your AFV. Because, of course, unlike infantry, they have a plethora of possible damage outcomes, which are a bit more complicated than simply wounded or killed or run away. So I'm going to be looking at these various things that can go wrong and just running through the rules that govern each one so that I hope you'll be left with a clearer idea of what can ruin your day if you're either a tank commander or your squad happens to be backed up by a tank which finds itself in some danger. Again, because they're the closest deck to hand. I have been playing that faction a lot recently. I'm going to pick on the Soviets again, but this time, because it's the last one, I am going to take the venerable and much respected T-34 out for a drive. So, the first thing we're going to look at before we move on to all the horrid man-made threats to a tank, I'm going to look at bogging down. Now, most of the time, the rules for bogging down are quite easy to remember because the terrain cards will always specify whether the risk of bogging down is a real one for an AFV that either enters that location or makes an overrun attack into it. So in this case, AFV entry overrun triggers a bog check. And the rules are fairly self-explanatory. You draw a random position check for the type of terrain you've got. If there's wire, you have to use the wire column. And you then see what happens. If it's a red random position check, then unfortunately your vehicle has bogged down. You then have to put this rather handy counter on it to remind you that not only can you now no longer move, but you are restricted to the terrain card that you last passed through. So let's say our T-34 was attempting to go through the woods and it failed its random position check. Very likely if it was buttoned up, because you'd have to use that column. So let's say our buttoned up AFV tried to enter the woods from open ground, failed its bog check. It is now bogged down. So the assumption is when that happens is that you have not actually entered the woods. So it's the worst of all possible worlds. You don't get any cover from the terrain you're attempting to enter, and you're stuck in the terrain that you left. Just to make matters worse, if you were coming from a hill or from a wall card, if you bog down, those are instantly converted, flipped, and turned into open ground, so you're very vulnerable. Now, when you're bogged down, you're reduced to using your armor's flank defense, which is always bad news because the ratings are much, much weaker. The good news is, as an action on subsequent turns, you can attempt to get out of this sticky situation. Now, for a regular armoured vehicle, being bogged down is bad, but in terms of your offensive capability, it's not catastrophic. You can continue to fire your main gun and your machine guns to some degree. Helpfully, the counter tells you what to do in this instant, and it's really only assault guns that suffer from being bogged down because of their lack of a turret, so they get a -2 on their to hit rating. Regular armor, as I say, is only affected in terms of their inability to move. So on subsequent turns, you can discard a move card and draw a black you can try to draw a black random number check. Let's just see what would have happened if we tried it next turn. No, that's no good. So he would have still been bogged another turn if he'd tried that. But when you do finally draw a black one, the bog token is removed and you can get going again. I'll just flip him back the right way up. I prefer my commanders poking out their turret hatches. So the next things that can go wrong with your tank are the inevitable malfunctions when you fire your weapons. I'm not going to dwell on these other than to say that these handy counters are provided by the game as a reminder. And whenever your tank suffers a malfunction, either to its machine gun, to its ordnance, or indeed to any other kind of primary weapon, the game even includes reminder counters for flamethrowers and other specialized tanks. And on the other side, it just tells you what the effects of failing a repair check are. As with infantry, the weapon has become inoperative, and you just leave the counter on your tank card as an aide-memoire for what's happening or not with that particular weapon. So the next thing I'm going to look at is battle damage, because of course, never mind these accidental things that you might do to your vehicle, either by driving it over unsuitable terrain or overworking your ordnance or your machine guns. So in brief, because I know I've covered this in other videos, whenever a hit is scored on a tank with an anti-tank piece of ordnance, the base strength, the box strength of the ordnance is added to the range to the target, the relative range, and on top of that is the effect of a random number check. So let's see what the armor strength is. So the front armor of a T-34 is, effectively to kill the tank, the attacker would have to get a total of 7. A K or kill result is fairly self-explanatory. Boom, the tank is gone and simply removed from play. If the threshold, whether it's on the front or the flank, see the flank armor is weaker there, a 4 in a flank hit or a 6 on a frontal armor hit would stun the tank. So stunning the tank means that it can do nothing, the crew's been concussed, and it gets one of these counters as stun level 3. And that sits there until you play enough rally cards. You basically need a rally 3 or greater to get rid of that. If you, and also, as you can see the effects, when you receive a stun result, you are pinned or buttoned up. If you're an open-topped vehicle, you're pinned. If you're an armored vehicle, as in this case, you're buttoned up. But the stun result ensures that you can't do anything. If you are attacked successfully and stunned again, the counter is flipped over to become a stun level 6. Same effect, but you now have a harder, lengthier job trying to get the tank back on its metaphorical feet. You now need to play either a rally 6 or a rally all. Hero cards can help. You can play a rally 3 on a stun level 6, but all that does is flip the counter back to stun level 3. And you have to try again next turn to get rid of that. If you are at stun level 6 and have the great misfortune to be hit and stunned again, then you are eliminated. The tank is gone. The exterior may well be intact, but the crew inside are not in a happy state. Excuse me. Sorry about that, everyone. Now, the lowest level of damage you can suffer is I, and that's immobilized. Now, immobilization damage is pretty catastrophic because it means for the rest of the scenario, your tank is not going anywhere. Where if you are subsequently attacked, as with Bogging Down, any attacks against you, even those from your front, are treated as if they're coming in from your flank. So it's a severe weakening. Assault guns, as ever, suffer a -2 to their to-hit rating. An immobilized tank can still fight at full capacity thanks to its turret, but you just are much, much more vulnerable. And as I say, there is no coming back from this state. You are in a very bad way if you're immobilized. If you're immobilized and you're hit again, you then become stunned. Now, that doesn't mean the immobilization counter goes away. The immobilization counter will stay throughout the game to remind you. But you then have the additional problem of a stunned crew to deal with. and further hits from there, if they continue to inflict more stuns, will accumulate in the manner I've just described for crew stunned results. The last thing I'm going to look at is the purely human factor. When you are crew exposed to maximize your combat potential, it is entirely possible that if you come under conventional attack, you will suffer casualties. So if you come under a machine gun or regular rather than anti-armor ordnance attack, and the threshold of the damage reaches your crew exposed level of 9, then you suffer a commander killed result. If it was, in this case, 5 or greater, the tank crew would simply button up without any losses. But if it does go all the way to that all-important crew exposed number, then you suffer a commander killed result. And the effect of that is -1 to your to-hit ratings and also to any machine gun or flamethrower ratings you may have. And also infantry infiltrating your position will have an easier time of it. If you should somehow manage to unbutton, but then suffer the same effect again, it flips over to 2 crew killed, which is very, very bad. Your combat ratings suffer a very adverse effect, and it gets even easier for hostile infantry to get close to your tank. So by the time you've got to that stage, your tank can still fight, but its effectiveness is very, very greatly reduced. And again, there is no way in this game of recrewing a tank once you've lost the crew. So that is another fairly severe thing. Doesn't start off too serious, but as casualties accumulate in your vehicle, that's when you have to start worrying. So that, in brief, short of total destruction, is everything that can go wrong with your vehicles. The rules for them are fairly straightforward. As with a lot of the other topics I've discussed recently, I would recommend having something of a cheat sheet nearby. Maybe even print off all the armor relevant ones on a single sheet so that they're there to hand. Certain ones, like these damage rules, I think you'll get used to fairly quickly with repeated plays. I personally find it's the bog checks and the bog consequences that I'm always forgetting, so it's handy to have the rule book around for those. But as I say, pity to end on a bit of a negative note, but it's important to know what can go wrong with your tanks if you're going to take them into battle. I hope that has been of use. As ever, a big thank you to you, whether you're one of my regulars or you're visiting the channel for the first time. It's been really great to have your company. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.